Ani, and welcome to our fourth tutorial in this series. And in this one we're going to talk about two different things. I'm going to go ahead and link on over to the tutorial. We're going to talk about functions and charts, two really crucial aspects of working with a spreadsheet. I'm going to go ahead and open up a blank spreadsheet here, Excel file, and just kind of have it off to the side here for a minute. The first thing we're going to talk about is functions. And what a function is it's like when you want to do a repeated action, or you want to do something like over and over again, rather than re-entering the same formula over and over and over again. So say I have some numbers, say 4, 6, some random numbers, and I want to add them all together. Rather than adding them together with the plus sign, we can do what we did before, what we did in the first tutorial, where we auto-sum. But what is actually happening when we do the auto-sum? It's creating what we call a function, or it's invoking what we call a function. And in particular, it's invoking the sum function. The sum function can be thought of as like a machine that you can put something inside of and then take something out of it. What you're putting inside of it is a bunch of numbers. What you're taking out of it is a number, which will be the sum of all the numbers that you put in. So, for example, the input goes inside these parentheses here. That's these cells. It's the range of cells. That's what this colon means, is it's a range of cells. The output is the number 38, because that is the sum of all of these numbers. To kind of visualize this, this is what a function is. A function is a black box. And by black box, we mean it's a box that we cannot see inside of. And it's a box that we don't want to see inside of, because we don't care how it adds the numbers together. We just care that it does add those numbers together. What we want is to know that when we put in some set of numbers, that the output will always be the same result. So a function is a machine, a device, that for every time I stick the same input in, I will always get the same output. The syntax of every function looks just like this. Like every formula in Excel or any spreadsheet software, it always starts with an equal sign, and then it has the name of the function, in this case SUM, sum, and it's supposed to be in all caps, but if you type it in lowercase, it'll automatically make it in all caps. And then it always has parentheses. So 2 parentheses, and inside the parentheses goes the arguments, which are the inputs. Those are the things that are going into the box, and then what displays in the cell is what's coming out of the box. So that's the output. So, for example, here I can try another function, equals. Let's try the average function. I start typing average, and you'll see that there's a couple of other variants of the average function. We're going to ignore them. We just want average. Left parentheses, we'll put our input in those cells, close the parentheses, and hit enter. And then we get the average of all those numbers. Let's see this in action. Let's start with the tutorial, which has a start file. We'll get to the chart stuff in a little bit. Downloading the start file to my downloads folder and opening. This is a bill. This is like some simulated bills. So I'm going to enable editing and close this use on mobile thing. I don't know why that's even there. So we have 4 bills: heat, water, internet, electricity, with 12 months, January through December. That's the data. And from this table, we're going to create a whole bunch more data. And first thing we're going to do is do some formatting. I'm going to take this top row here. So I'm highlighting all the cells from A1 through M1, merge and center, and then down here I'm going to give it the title style because it looks nice. Then I'm going to highlight the data. So starting with the headings, bill, all the way across to December, and then all the way down here. And we're going to go insert table. My table has headers. Make sure that's checked. Hit OK. I'm going to call this one bills. Just renaming the table. And so now we have the table. Okay, so now here's there's some cool tricks that you can do with Excel. Let's add a total row. Total. Watch what happens when I hit tab. It automatically adds it to the table. Gets it the formatting that it needs. So let's say we want to total this up. What do? We could hit auto sum, and that's usually what you would do, but I'm going to do it by hand just to show how it works. Equals, then type the word sum, and then a left parenthesis. Then I highlight the numbers that I want to add together, and close the parentheses, and hit enter. And there I have it. Now, I don't do this by hand the whole way. I'll use the fill handle to do the rest. Now we can also add a total column. Again, total, enter. It'll add it automatically to the table. Go equals, sum, left parentheses, highlight January through December, just in the data. Notice it gave us some new syntax. It's using the word bills. That indicates that it's this table. And then January through December, that's the headings on the table. So it's automatically picking that out and using that as part of the syntax. Close the right parentheses. You don't have to mess with it. You don't even have to know it. It's just that you can, if you look at it close enough, you can see what the syntax means, even if you don't know why it has all those square brackets and the @ sign and all that stuff. It's completely irrelevant because it's doing what we want it to do. Hit enter. And here's the cool thing. I don't know if you noticed it, but it automatically filled in the rest of the column with the same thing. All of those are correct. Let's play with a few other functions. Let's try average. Average, enter, automatically. And in fact, let's go ahead and add a couple more. Let's go here and head up to the right, and we'll do a min, or a max, and a min. So we'll find the maximum and the minimum. Very quick to do. Equals average, left parenthesis. We're going to grab December through January and hit enter, and it'll fill in the whole column. Max will find the largest number in a group. And remember, this seems like an easy thing to do, but it isn't. If you have hundreds of rows, your eyes can't pick out the largest value or even the smallest value out of thousands of numbers as quickly as a computer can. So we'll add min, and then we have the max and the min for each one of these bills. You can do some light formatting stuff like this. Let's make sure these all have the same number of decimal points so you can kind of see what's going on there. By the way, these are the numbers right here that affect decimal points. Let's do one more. Let's do percent of total. This one isn't explicitly a function, but what we're going to try to do is we want to know which bill was what percentage of all of our bills. And in order to get that, you would take the number here, the total number that you paid for that bill for the year, and then divide it by the total of all the bills. So we would start with equal sign, total, divided by, slash, this number, N7 is this cell. But if I copy and paste that down using the fill handle, it's going to start dividing by 0 when it copies down to here. When this one will be dividing this number by this blank one. You're going to get a divide by 0 error. So you do have to make this N7 into a absolute reference by sticking those dollar signs in there. Hit enter, and then we've got our percentages. If you highlight these and then apply the percentage style up here, then they look much nicer. So yeah, this bill was 29% of the bill of all of our bills. This was 90%. This one was 48%. I believe that's electricity. This is fake data. None of this is real. But anyway, that is kind of in a nutshell our a quick introduction to functions in Excel. We're going to explore this in a little bit more detail in the next couple of weeks, but this is basically the main use cases for functions, and these are the ones that you're going to end up using the most. The sum function is by far the most commonly used function there is. But there are functions that are able to manipulate text, and functions that can do statistical stuff, functions that are financial in nature, like doing mortgage payments and things like that. But let's move on to charts. Now, a chart, what is a chart? A chart is a way of taking raw data and telling stories with it, which is something that humans are, we're really bad at looking at raw data and extracting stories. So one of the things that makes computers useful is that they're able to take raw data and then create a story with it. So like if I told you the price of a Bitcoin every day for these years, you wouldn't be able to tell me that, this. I mean, it wouldn't mean anything to you. But if I draw a picture with it, then suddenly the parts of our brains that are most well developed, like the parts that are process things like visual data, because our eyes are one of our most important organs. Once you see visual data, then it's much easier for us to tell stories about the data. Like, for example, a line graph. Or Excel almost exclusively calls them charts. There's we don't use the word graph as much. We pretty much always call a data visualization a chart. So a line graph is a graph that shows some data over time, usually over time. Not always, but almost always. It's used to show a change in something over time, like stock prices, or in this case, the price of Bitcoin over a period of years. A pie chart is used to show parts of a whole. So you have a whole pie, and you eat a slice of pie, and now you have a pie chart that shows how much pie has been eaten versus how much pie that hasn't been. Or in this case, budget revenue, spending and revenue pie charts for the U.S. government. And then a bar chart, or actually would be, in Excel terms, is called a column chart. Column charts and bar charts are used to show comparisons between different groups of things. So here we're grouping different $5,000 household income increments, and then how much of a percentage of U.S. households that is. It's a little bit misleading because it looks like these are the same, but these last two are not, and you only really notice it if you look really carefully at the spikes at the end. It doesn't mean that there's lots of rich people. It just means that there's, fewer and fewer people the higher and higher you go. Scatter plots just take two variables and compare them. So in this case, it is over time, but it is not. But it doesn't have to be. Like this one right here shows length and width of clams and shows how closely correlated they are. Here's another scatter plot that shows the days of ice on Lake Superior over a period of years, and then the average temperature in winter. And you can kind of see that there would be like a downward trend line right here going through like this. The colder the winter was, the more days of ice on Lake Superior. Makes sense, right? Okay. So that's what a scatter plot is. There's a couple of other, if you read through the tutorial, there's a couple of other little supplemental links that lead you to some interesting or fun things that you can look at, like a website on spurious correlations, which is pretty fun to look at. They're kind of funny. But, excuse me, we're gonna do some charts in here. So here's our data, and what we want to build is a bar chart that shows the 12 months of the year and each bill for those 12 months. You can do this pretty easily. We want to select, the data that we want to select is we want the headings, January, bill, the word bill through the word December, and we want to go all the way to the bottom of the table. So we do in fact want that total row, but we do not want the total column. So we're going only out to column M on this table. And then let go. So this is the data we're going to use to build a bar chart. Sometimes, so we go to the Insert tab, and sometimes Excel will give you really reasonable recommendations if you just click Recommended Charts. And in fact, this is really close to what we are looking for. However, we're going to get there by hand, just so that I can show you some of the tools. So we're going to go here to Column. So these are horizontal ones are bars, columns are verticals. So we're going to take the first 2D column one and see what it gives us. Okay, right now it gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clusters. And each cluster has 12 columns. So that's kind of cool. You can kind of see, like each one of these is the year's story in that bill or in the total, which is, that's maybe kind of useful. It's not exactly what we're going for though. Right now, we kind of want the horizontal axis to be time. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to change the horizontal axis to time by switching our rows and columns up here. Oops. Click on switch row and column, and then you have 12 clusters of bars, and each one has 4 bars. So, or 5, I'm sorry. But even this isn't quite right. But this is better, but this isn't quite what we're looking for. What would be cool is if that last bar on each one, which is the total, was kind of its own thing. So let's change that. Let's go up here to change chart type. And then down here we're going to try a combo chart. And it's immediately going to guess correctly what we're trying to do. But it does kind of get some things wrong. It's like electricity here. It's interpreting that as a line. We're just going to make that back into a bar, into a column. And then, so now we've got the total as a line, which is neat. That's the part of the visualization that we want. But since that is like all of the other bars like added together, what we want to do is give that its own axis. And we actually have 2 sides of the chart that we can use as axes. So everything's on this scale right here. If we give the total its own axis, then all the other data suddenly bumps up, and we have a second axis on the right-hand side, but now the line isn't suppressing all the other data, and it looks a lot nicer, and you can see the detail more accurately. All right, let's rename it. You just sort of double-click on the title and then type monthly bills or something like that. And that's it. That is the first chart. Let's move it. So right now it's sitting on our main table. Let's go click on Move Chart, and then we're going to give it its own sheet. It's called a chart sheet. So we're going to click New Sheet, and we're going to call it Monthly Bills. And then we're going to hit OK, and boom, there it goes. It's on its own sheet. If you were printing this off, this would get its own piece of paper, and this is what it would look like. Let's do one more quick chart here. This one's a little tricky. We want to do a pie chart with the total data, but we also want the labels. So how do we get both of those onto the same chart? Because these cells are over here and these ones are over here, so I can't really select them both at the same time, or can I? Normally, you can only select cells that are contiguous, that are all in the same rectangle. But if you select some cells and then hold the Control key on your keyboard and select more cells, you can select cells that are not contiguous. You can select them all you want. You could do something like, there's a couple of ways you could do this. You could select everything and then hold the Control key and deselect the middle, or you could select the labels. Those 4 cells, just heat, water, internet, electricity, then hold the Control key and select the totals. You can do it that way. And that's the most common way you'll do something like this. So that's what we want. We just want the labels and the totals. And then we're going to make a pie chart that shows all of them as a pie. Insert, pie chart, 2D pie, done. You can style these up however you like. You can add these styles if you want. But I'll show you a few little tricks to make things look kind of more professional. So here's our chart. We're going to call it bill totals. And then we're going to add some elements. Up here, add chart element. By the way, this is the chart design tab, which is only available when you are working on a chart. Like if I click away from the chart, that tab goes away. So chart design tab. Add chart element. Let's add some data labels. Data labels are like a little call out that goes straight on the data itself. So I like the data callouts, which adds a little text box right next to each pie slice. And it looks nice. And it has the percentages right on it. Now with that, we don't actually need the legend, so we can go back up here, go to legend, and get rid of it. Go to none. And that's it. That's our pie chart. Let's move it. Move chart to our new one. We'll call it bill totals. Enter. And there it's on its own. Let's do one more thing. And this is kind of cool. we're going to do spark lines and data bars. So we're going to shove everything over. So I'm going to select column O right here, and I want to shove everything to the right so I get a new column to play with. So we're going to select column O and then hit the insert button over here on the home tab, and I'll just shove everything over and create a new column. I'm going to select this, and I'm going to say year trend. So what a spark line is it's a chart in a single cell. And this is how you create one. You go to insert, and they're over here, spark lines. You do lines and columns. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these blank cells here and click on the line version of a spark line. And now it's going to ask what data you want. And so the data range I want is from December through January. Just the numerical data and not the totals. Not the totals. The totals will cause a little spike at the end and it won't look nice. So we'll just select this and then hit OK. And look what it gives us. Okay. You see these cool little line graphs right inside of each cell. And that is kind of a neat little thing that you can do with what we call spark lines. Let's add one more little detail. Go back to home and let's do what's called data bars. And it's kind of hard to explain before you do it. So what we'll do, so you'll just see it in action and then it'll make sense. I'm going to select these 4 cells, just the data, not the total. Just the totals except for the bottom one. And then we're in our home tab, we're going to go to conditional formatting. And we're going to go down to data bars. And then pick a color that you like. I'm going to pick green. Yeah, you can do the gradients too. Those actually look kind of nice. I'm going to pick this green one though. But see what it does. It fills in each one of the cells in that column with an amount of color based on the amount that's in the cell. So the largest number in that column is going to get filled all the way, and then every other one will be filled up proportional to that one. So if I do something like add $1 million here, you'll see the other bars get really, really small. If I put a tiny number in here, you'll see them all get bigger, proportionally. So let's see here, and if I make this one like 1,000, you'll see that one pop up. So all of them will change basically in relation to the numbers that you have there. So that's it. This is done. With this, you can save it, and then go up here, back to the tutorial, choose file folder, and charting start, open, submit. And we're done. And we'll see you all in the next video.